As you can see, this video is about wireless MAC address authentication. Having looked at the wired 802.1x wireless .1x authentication and wired MAC address authentication, this should be fairly simple for you because we already know all the steps and we should be able to do this exactly almost in the same way we did the previous configurations. This is the scenario. These are wireless devices which need to be authenticated. The authentication control device now is the wireless access controller. The wireless access controller and the agile controller are going to be used for making this authentication happen. The configuration steps are similar, but now we are going to do MAC authentication for wireless users or for wireless terminals. These are the steps, or this is the configuration which you need to have done already before we start off with the authentication related configuration on our access controller and our agile controller. This is the configuration which you have already seen a number of times, which should be fairly simple for you now. What we are doing here is that we are configuring the radius server template. In the radius server template, we are configuring the authentication and the counting servers. Then we are configuring the authorization server. We are configuring their keys. Then we are configuring the authentication scheme, authentication mode, counting scheme, counting mode, and the counting interval. Then we configure a MAC access profile and we name it as MAC, and because EAP is the default protocol, we keep using that. We don't need to use anything because for MAC address we don't need anything. It is going to be the default configuration. The authentication profile name is going to be MAC as well. We can name it anything. And then we call the MAC access profile, we call the authentication scheme, we call the accounting scheme, and we call the radius server template here. We combine all this in the authentication profile. And as you know already, remember from the previous configuration, we are going to call this authentication profile in the web profile in the next configurations. So here are the next configurations. We enter the wireless LAN configuration mode. Here we configure the security profile and name the security profile as security-MAC. Then we configure the SSID profile and we assign an SSID, for example, MAC access. Then we configure a WAP profile, configure the forwarding mode as terminal service VLAN is 100, and then we combine or call the security profile, the SSID profile, and the authentication profiles which we have already configured. And then we assign this WAP profile to the AP group which we must already have configured and assign the access points to this access group. Once this is done, then we move over to the agile controller side, and on the agile controller we add the wireless access controller and we configure the appropriate authentication and radius related configurations, authentication and authorization keys. Then we move over to the configuration of authentication rule. We configure the MAC bypass authentication. We configure the rule that we need to implement MAC bypass authentication. We've already looked at this in previous videos, so I'm just going through this a little faster. Then we add the MAC addresses for which we want to do the authentication. Only those MACs will be allowed which we configure or for which we configure the add device configuration. Then we configure add the authorization rules. Only those devices which pass through the MAC authentication will be permitted access, and those for which MAC authentication has not happened, they will be denied the access. And finally, we can look at verify the configuration. Display access user or display access user, and specifically for access type MAC authentication. This means you only want to look at users who have been authenticated using MAC authentication. Once we have done this means our configuration for wireless MAC authentication is complete. Finally, at the end of this module, let's take a brief look at the different troubleshooting steps that we can perform. Let's take a look at 802.1x authentication troubleshooting. The basic configuration troubleshooting that we need to take care of is the major problem arises when there is configuration mismatch or configuration inconsistency between the authentication controlling device, which might be your aggregation switch or might be your wireless access controller, the configuration that we have done on these devices, and the corresponding configuration which we do on the agile controller. As I have mentioned a number of times, this configuration has to be consistent. If this configuration is not consistent, then obviously the authentication will not work or the authentication will not be successful. A very useful and handy command that we can use to test our AAA configuration is the test AAA command. We can use this command to test our AAA configuration both on the access controller or on the aggregation switch and on the agile controller on the other side. So you can use any of one of the test accounts to test the configuration, the AAA configuration on the devices on the two sides of the connection, that is your aggregation switch and the agile controller, or your wireless access controller and your agile controller. So this was all about 802.1x authentication and MAC authentication. So see you in the next video with two other types of authentication, that is SAC key authentication and portal authentication. Thank you.